But I'm afraid this costume's not to my taste. If I am going to be this Zorro chappie, I want to make more of a statement. I want the world to recognize Zorro the Gay Blade.
Hello and welcome once again to the Cine-Files. My name is Steve Morris. I'm a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Roca. I'm a voiceover artist, writer, producer, and host over at Collider, and the co-host of the Top 10 podcast and the Geek Buddies podcast. And this one.
And this one.
Yeah.
And there's also Deep Cuts.
Now, yeah, the Deep Cut, which I do over at Collider Conversations. That one's actually starting to pick up some steam.
That's
it's
great.
really nice. I've been very, I know you're a big fan of documentaries. It's been great to have, carve out this little niche of directors that want to come on because I'm giving their documentaries a lot of love and giving their experiences on those documentaries a lot of love. So I'm excited.
And it's nice. I hope you will not take this the wrong way. I've listened to your opinions on all sorts of podcasts, including this one.
Yeah.
And it's nice hearing you as the interviewer, getting to kind of delve into someone else's life and their experience. And you do a really nice job of it. And I'm enjoying hearing that part of John Roca.
That's very kind of you. It's what I really want. What you hear me do there is what I ultimately want to do. But I love doing all of this. But that's more where I want to end up going, is that kind of podcast, just interview podcast,
Right.
And somehow make a living doing that. So,
well, you're managing to.
yeah, piece by piece.
So those of you who listen to the show regularly, you might have noticed I did not do my regular intro about entering the world of a great film. And that's because this week and next week, we're going to do something a little bit different. And this is a little bit of an experiment for us. And I'm honestly a little bit nervous. And that is that we are going to explore two guilty pleasures.
Yes.
This week with your guilty pleasures, Zorro the Gay Blade,
Yes.
George Hamilton, 1981. And next week, one of my favorite guilty pleasure martial arts movies, which is Bruce Lee's Way of the Dragon from 1972. And the way this came about was you and I were talking on our Q&A, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
If you haven't listened to it, it's our 150th episode. We answered a whole bunch of questions from all our listeners.
We did.
And one of the questions was about guilty pleasures, and we told those two movies. And we got a message from our, I believe, #1 supporter on Patreon, which is Matthew Hasso, who I know is also a big supporter of the Top 10 show.
He is.
And he's been an incredible person supporting the show, publicizing the show, and helping us to make it. And he said, basically, I will pay you guys cash money to do those guilty pleasures on the Cine-Files. And we, demonstrating, I think, our incredible moral core and high journalistic standards, said, how much money? and what's funny about it is, the first thing I wanted to hear is kind of hear from Matthew Hasso of what he thinks about, I'd say today, about Zorro the Gay Blade.
Hello, John and Steve. This is Matthew Hasso, and I wanted to say thank you so much for doing Zorro the Gay Blade. This is a movie I've been watching since I was a kid. I think when it first hit the movie channels, HBO or Showtime, was the first time I saw it, and I've watched it consistently my entire life. The thing I think I love the most about this movie is it's so fast, it's so witty, it's so hilarious, and even though there are some of it that's, definitely kind of dated, I still laugh more and more every time I watch it. I think when I first saw it, I was just glad to be watching a Zorro movie. Some of it was kind of cute and funny, but most of it was completely over my head. As I got older and started understanding more of it and getting more of the jokes, it's just gotten more and more hilarious. Especially the last time I watched it was when I shared it with my wife, and we were just dying laughing. The highlights for these movies are just the scenes between Don Diego and Esteban, as he's very suspicious of his longtime boyhood amigo, is Zorro, and just the little back and forth of them and the timing they have, the comedy they have. I mean, I can watch those scenes back and forth, and often I do. But I do want to say thanks for doing this. I really hope you guys have a good time revisiting this or watching it. And I'm just dying to hear what you guys have to say about this classic Zorro the Gay Blade.
All right, thanks for that. And thank you so much for all your support.
Yeah. A lot of words there. A lot of words by Matthew about his love of the movie and his guilty pleasure about it, feelings about it.
Yeah. And so I want to share something with our audience, which is as John and I are picking movies and we're getting ready to do things, there's always some back and forth as we try to figure out what exactly we want to do and maybe how we want to handle things. And I got to say, that in the last couple of days, I started to get some real anxiety about Zorro the Gay Blade. And I texted you yesterday and said, man, I don't know. You know, I don't know if we can do this. You know, and you were watching Way of the Dragon at the time and pointed out that there is a very cartoony stereotype gay character in Way of the Dragon. And isn't this a double standard for me? And I went, and I was like, of course there is, and we should talk about it because it's really, right there. But I said, which I thought was a perfectly good defense, was that Bruce Lee is a cultural icon, and he's a huge, loved by millions, just recently highlighted in Quentin Tarantino movie, very important figure. And that's what the difference is. And you wrote back, and it just rocked me. You said, well, what about Zorro? You know? And I stayed up late last night thinking about that. I've been thinking about that all morning, and it really has made me think about this film in a way I never would have because of you saying that. I will say I still don't like the movie.
That's fair. That's absolutely fair.
But it's made me kind of go, maybe there is something to discuss here.
Yeah.
In terms of what draws us to films and why they are important to us. Even when we acknowledge that maybe these aren't the best films in the world, which they're not,
Right. But they're still fun to do. And fans always come at us and go, we want you to do more guilty pleasure movies, or we want you to do older movies. And we've kind of been having conversations about that over the last few weeks anyway. And so this kind of came out organically out of the Q&A episode, as you said. So I feel like we're kind of hitting the guilty pleasure button, or checking that box rather, in a way that's fun for both of us, because it's one movie that I absolutely love. And then your movie next week is a movie that I did not see until last night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'd only ever seen the fight with Chuck Norris. I'd never seen the actual movie till I saw it last night. And
it's a weird movie.
It's a very weird movie, but enjoyable. Yeah. And I, at times with some of these martial arts movies, it's not about the plot.
Right.
But Bruce tried really hard to do something with these plots that was unusual or different, whether it be a comedic tone about toilets or whatever. Right. It was just something that made it stand out. And for that, he deserves a lot of credit.
I mean, we'll talk about it next time. What's interesting to me is like the plot. A bunch of mobsters want to get this Chinese restaurant for some reason.
Yeah.
Is stupid as hell.
It's flimsy as hell.
But there's all sorts of other stuff that's sort of like, well, we'll talk about it now.
Yes.
We're digressing.
But I would say there's just as much to talk about in this movie, and we'll see as we go along. And for the fans who are listening, Steve and I never talk about it. We rarely talk about our points ahead of time.
Right.
And it comes up organically through the show. So I have no idea what Steve is going to say. And the fact that it rocked him for last night into this morning, I am now even more curious about how he's going to approach this movie. And I'm actually excited to see what comes up.
Well, what's interesting to me is that I think, and this is what you saying, well, what about Zorro made me think about, is that in some way, something that these movies both have in common is, in a weird way, they're about representation.
Yes.
And they're about representation in a way of, like, today, the movement is really trying to have people of different experiences, different ethnicities on screen in big roles in lead characters, and make them just as important as all the white people that have been the stars of movies forever. Mm-hmm. Back in 1972 or back in 1981, we didn't get that.
Yeah.
We got the only way that things were represented was in a kung fu movie or in a strange comedy. That's all there was.
Yeah.
And so as someone who was a immigrant watching Way of the Dragon in 1972, or someone who is an African-American watching Way of the Dragon, or I was thinking about you being a Latino kid in 1981, and this movie comes out, and how many movies were there with anybody doing anything about Spanish in 1981?
Yeah, and this is one of my favorite families films, because there wasn't that many mainstream films that addressed a hero like Zorro. Yes, back in the 40s and 50s, we'd had, was it, I forget it was, who it was.
Tyrone Power.
Tyrone Power, which was one of my mother's favorite actors. And he would play Zorro in these old serials. But we didn't get Latino-based films or Latino-cultured films. And this was a mainstream film with an actor who at the time was somewhat potent, still potent. The name was potent at the time. And so to see him step in to do this with a bunch of other actors who are of note, Brenda Vaccaro's of note, Donovan Scott worked for a long time,
Hutton.
and Ron Liebman worked for a long time. So for me, it was exciting to see that. And a majority of the cast around them, and Lauren Hunt, right, you're right, a majority of the cast around them is Latino. And so that was so
Even
great.
though your main characters are not.
Are not, yeah, exactly. The main actors, rather, yes, are not. Yeah, exactly. But this was something that was really, until La Bamba came along, this was something that we held on to. And El Norte was more of a art house film, so not a lot of us went to go see that.
Well, and this is what I'm going to call to some degree, I can't think of a better term, is the beggars can't be choosers principle. Is that had there been really dynamic, Latino filmmakers making films, then this might not have had the effect that it had on you. Right. But because it's like, well, this is what it is, and we've heard about it over and over today of the power of seeing somebody like you on film, and as a Jewish kid, they were all Jews, so like, and I'm a white Jewish guy. So like, I didn't have that experience that a lot of people have, which is like, oh, that's me. And even though there's ridiculous things in both of these films, there's still something to say about this is, you don't break through these barriers like with a huge bulldozer and knock them down all at once. You chip away at them. And this is sort of maybe one of the beginnings of it. Do you remember? I think you kind of already said the answer. You remember how you first came to it?
Yeah, we went as a family to see this in the movie theater. I remember I was 11 years old when this thing came out, 10 or 11. I remember my dad, and my mom took me to our whole family to go see this. We went downtown to see it in the Spanish community that was there in D.C. So we saw it in a theater full of people who were Latino and enjoyed the hell out of this. We used to go to that theater to see.
So it was like a Latino audience.
It was a Latino audience, yeah.
Wow.
So a lot of immigrants, a lot of people who had come over to the country, and their children who maybe were born here too, all together. Because that used to be the theater we'd go down to see the old Cantinflas movies.
Right.
We'd see all that, and so that was a theater we always went to. Like every few Sundays, something would come out. We'd go as a group down there, and Zorro the Gay Blade was one of them.
And there's no reaction of like, this isn't really us. This is a fake version. There was no because Cantinflas is a real
authentic. Yeah, authentic. Is essentially the Latino Charlie Chan,
right.
Charlie Chaplin rather, the Mexican Charlie Chaplin. But seeing this was more about seeing them make fun of Zorro was actually fun because they make fun of it without ever disrespecting it. And I think that's the gift of this movie that not a lot of people give it credit for. Yes, it's played for laughs, it's all for jokes, but there's real seriousness here about taking on the role of Zorro, how it's passed on from father to son. Like, it's real. And that's like something that's in the heritage of Latinos, this idea of taking on, what has been before of your father and somehow doing better with it or somehow expanding it. And so seeing that as the foundation of the film before it gets into all the ridiculousness was great. And it felt like he was Latino. It felt like he was like Tony Montana does in Scarface. Felt like he was Cuban.
So you're good with him because I have no judgment on it.
Oh no, I loved it. I love it.
And you're good with his accent and the whole
everything. And Rob Liebman, and I'll tell you why I'm good with it, because when they both speak Spanish, it's authentic.
Oh, good.
It sounds authentic. It does not sound like someone putting on the language. Do you know what I'm saying? And so,
will you give them the honorary Latino award that you've given to Eli Wallach and a few other people throughout this podcast?
Yes, I absolutely would, to both of them, because
this is a valuable award.
Yes, I mean, I do not give it to many people. No.
So I wanted to talk about since and this is part of what you made me think of last night by that text was I went, oh, I need to look into Zorro. Because Zorro is an icon. And what was interesting to me is like, in a weird way, I think we think of Zorro as like a legendary character in the tradition of King Arthur and Robin Hood and Scarlet Pimpernel and all this. But King Arthur and Robin Hood are characters that evolved out of folk legends over many, many centuries. That's not what Zorro is. No. Zorro is a guy named Johnston Macaulay in 1919 wrote a pulp book, and that is where Zorro comes from. It is not out of any tradition. It's not out of any Latino anything.
Right.
It's a dude, I think he's in Boston, who wrote this thing, knowing probably very little about early California history or anything.
Right.
And he writes it. And what I didn't realize was it was supposed to be a one shot, and Zorro gets revealed at the end, and the bad guy dies, and that's it. And then I didn't realize that Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford, that this is the first United Artists film that they did. I had no idea, and that's 1920.
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know, United Artists was formed by the three biggest stars at the time, Douglas Fairbanks, Mary Pickford, and Charlie Chaplin, and the biggest director at the time, D.W. Griffith, because they wanted to control their own destiny, and they formed this company where they could make their own movies. And this is the very first one, The Mark of Zorro.
Yeah, The Mark of Zorro.
And which I've seen parts of. I don't think I've ever seen the whole movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's fun. It's fun, but it's also old,
Well, sure. And I guess Johnston Macaulay at that point went, I got to write some more Zorro
I
books.
got to make some more money.
And this became one of those properties that, like we talked about with King Arthur, like we talked about with Robin Hood, he wrote 50 short stories. He wrote a bunch of serialized stories. The last one he wrote was published posthumously in 1959. Wow. Yeah. So he kept doing it. It's had over 40 films, a whole bunch of serials, TV shows, the biggest one being the Disney one, 57 to 59.
Right.
Like Zorro has become, and it's one of these things like everything else, which is every few years, we're going to get another version of the Zorro story. And you can't talk about Batman without talking about Zorro. There is no Batman without Zorro. The masked guy who pretends to be the kind of ludicrous playboy who goes around at night and is the Avenger and all. There's so much of what became, because, Zorro's 1919.
Yep.
And all of superhero fiction, all those guys read Zorro. Of course they did.
Yeah.
So none of the stuff we have happens, I believe, without Zorro.
That's certainly possible. And that's such a great point you make, Stephen. So you can I know people right now are like pulling over in their cars going, what the hell are you talking about? And maybe having their minds blown a little bit. But yes, all the bones here are in numerous superhero creations and iterations of characters that come decades later after Zorro, but this was in the pop culture. This was watched. This was consumed. This was newspapers, newspaper strips, comic strips. It was all of it was here. There were comic books for Zorro. There were little like pulp novels. There was everything you could possibly want. So
I'm sure there was a radio show.
Yeah, I'm sure there was a radio show. And these people, yes, there was. And these people who grow up from this stuff are the ones who go on to create superheroes. So why not?
Well, and maybe this ties into kind of what we're saying in terms of guilty pleasures. It's my assumption if you and I went back and read the original 1919 story, it was probably pretty stupid.
Maybe.
And just as the vast majority of the early Superman comics were basically pretty stupid.
Super cheesy.
And the argument that was made for 50 years about comic books, including in my childhood, that this was for kids stuff and it would rot your brain and all that stuff that we grew up with.
Yeah.
There was a lot of truth there because a lot of them were pretty bad.
Yeah.
But they clearly touched on something that we understood was important, even if the quality of the thing delivering it wasn't that good. And that's what goes, and certainly true of a whole bunch of kung fu films and blaxploitation films and all these things where it's like we saw something there. Even when we knew they weren't really great films.
Right.
But we saw something that was important to us. And I think what we're seeing today maybe is that has moved into the mainstream. That finally, they're getting actually, this is important. And let's put our best people on it. And we'll see. And then we get this great stuff, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and stuff. And a lot of that goes all the way back to Johnson McCulley in 1919.
There you go.
Writing probably a pretty bad story.
Yeah, right. But I think you make a great thing at the end, and I know we need to move on, but like this is now the backlash is starting to happen against these movies and against these superhero movies,
right?
And it's the same old complaints.
Yeah,
this is just kid stuff. This is just big. They're not really talking about anything real, and these are people who are not consuming the content and understanding what the core foundation of the stories of these films are. And missing the whole damn point.
For me, there's a food metaphor, which is this is all part of your balanced breakfast. Yep. Is that if you just ate nothing but the superhero films, you would not have a balanced diet.
Right.
Just as if you watched only one news source or went only one, you actually need a bunch of stuff in your diet that includes some dramas and some comedies and some other stuff.
Classics. Yeah.
Some classics in order to be a well-rounded media savvy person.
Yes.
I'm going to give one piece of pre-production. That is all I have. Okay. This is not a highly researched podcast today. Most of the research was all in Zorro. The one piece of pre-production is Love at First Bite.
Yeah.
Which that's the movie I watched.
Yeah.
I watched that one over and over again. And that's 1979, I think, and George Hamilton. And he's playing Dracula going to New York in the disco era.
Yeah.
And everyone goes, hey, this guy's funny. And there is no Zorro the Gay Blade without Love at First Bite.
It's true, which is a great one if you haven't revisited that one. Artie Johnson as Renfield, Susan St. James as a love interest, and the great Richard Benjamin as Van Helsing is so... And Dick Shawn from It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. He's in there as the detective. I'm telling you, there's so many funny moments in Love at First Bite. And we saw that one, which motivated us as well to go see Zorro the Gay Blade.
So I never answered how I came to this film.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I watched Love at First Bite a whole bunch.
Yeah.
I'd seen it. I'd seen Zorro the Gay Blade a couple of times. I didn't watch it a lot. I probably watched it on, it was on TV. And I saw some of it. But I watched Love at First Bite a lot.
Yeah.
That was the one that really hit me.
Yeah.
would you like to get into your guilty pleasure, sir?
Let's do it.
So the one big thing that is so damn recognizable is the score.
Oh. Yes, I loved it.
No, you just did the score. That was not it. You just did Holy Grail.
Isn't it similar?
It is.
Oh, no. Dun, 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 dun.
Do you know where it comes from?
No, where?
It's Max Steiner's score for Don Juan in like 1938. And it's a fantastic score. It is a fantastic score. And we start with some black and white 4x3 footage, which I wondered if it was from the TV show, from the Disney show.
Good call.
And then we head off to Spain.
By the way, quick thing.
Yeah.
The narrator on that black and white, Frank Welker.
Oh,
Yes.
interesting.
From Transformers.
Oh, and I should say, by the way, it is directed by, I
think it's Peter Medic.
Peter Medic,
Yeah.
who directed Romeo's Burning.
Yep.
And then's done a bunch of TV. He did episodes of The Wire, Sex and the City. He did episode of Breaking Bad. I mean, the guy,
Good director.
the guy's been, well, he is a, you know what? He is a good director.
He's a good director.
He's not going on any lists.
No, right, probably not.
But I mean, Breaking Bad is one of the great TV shows. I don't know what episode he did. And we hear that there's this Legend of Zorro, and now it's 50 years later, and we're off in Spain, and we go into this bedroom, and there is George Hamilton in bed with a woman, and it is romantic.
Sure.
And there's some jokes about, do you think I'm a good wife? And he goes, says all sorts of nice things, and she says, why doesn't my husband think that?
Because he's not intelligent. He is not intuitive. He is not insightful.
And in walks the husband, and he says,
And he is not in Barcelona.
He's not in Barcelona. Or something like that. What does he say?
Yep, that's
Yeah,
it. It's not in Barcelona. And these are the jokes.
Yep.
I actually like that joke.
No, that's a good joke. Oh, okay.
That one I like. And there, this joke is the next joke is will sum up so much of the humor of this movie.
Garcia, I am astonished you would enter my house without my permission.
I might say the same thing about you and my wife.
This is the level we're playing at here, people. You're either in or you're out from the first scene, I think.
So Lindley watched it with you, huh?
Listen, I tried. I brought her in at
Speaking of in or out.
Yeah, she was not a fan of this movie. No, she said it's dad jokes to the extreme.
And we start a sword fight, and Diego says, I could fight 4 of you, and in come 4 more guys, and now he's fighting 5.
Yes.
The sword play, not
a fan of the sword play?
No.
All right.
There was the one big fight with him and Liebman, which I'm sure is neither. It's just 2 stunt guys. That one's pretty good.
Yes.
All the other stuff is not so good.
Right.
In my opinion.
Okay.
And at the same time, in comes Paco, the mute servant.
Yes.
Who has to charade a message out.
A letter? Do you think this is the right time?
And the message is something about come back to California.
Yes.
And so
From his dad.
he jumps out the window and hits the road.
Yep.
And we end up back in Los Angeles, California.
Los Angeles de California. The birthplace of me.
And as soon as he arrives, a carriage comes up with a soldier, and we get to meet Esteban.
Alcalde.
He's a ridiculous villain.
But he fits the film. Like, the film is ridiculous, but he fits the film because of his ridiculous approach to playing the alcalde, which is a stereotypical villain in these stories who is keeping the peoples under his thumb, taxing them to no end. And he's just great. It's just great because they initially look at each other, but there's not that kind of hey, it's so good to see you. And I compare this to Ben-Hur.
I knew you were going to say
yes. when Masala and Ben-Hur see each other, it's more of a warm embrace. This is more of a, I know who you are. I'm jealous of who you are because you're so good looking, whatever. I'm wary of who you are because I know how dirty you were when we were kids. So they have an uneasy reunion, I would say.
That is exactly what they are doing in the film.
Yes.
You have described it perfectly. Now we also get to meet Brenda Vaccaro, who is Florinda.
Yes.
And we see the obvious flirtation, and there's a moment of, we were competing for her, and it's kind of like, oh, you won or something. And there's a joke that's...
So our long rivalry for her hands is over, huh? Again, I congratulate you.
No, this time I congratulate you.
There's the subtle cracks.
Well,
throughout this movie, there's a lot of subtle stuff at the end of sentences.
Well, and this is the harpy wife trope. You know, like I'm stuck with this woman who is sex craved for Diego or sex starved, and I'm stuck with her, and we have a crappy marriage, and that's and that joke's going to get hit a bunch,
a few times on both sides.
Yeah. And Esteban's getting elected to be the new alcalde, and there's these are the jokes, folks. It's like Don so and so from San Jose, Don so and so from San Diego, and then
Don Jose from San Bernardino.
Luis Obispo from Bakersfield.
Which is a very inside
that's
California
a California joke, man. It's so funny,
and they're all Latino. They're all authentically Latino. All
they
those
are
actors.
Okay, yeah. It'd be interesting to do a survey of all the people living in California and asking them, where do you think all these names of all the places you live come from?
Yeah,
and certainly there's a huge population of Latinos in California who would know that this was part of Mexico and part of Spain.
Yeah,
but there are a whole bunch of people here who probably just I don't know.
Yeah, who had no clue.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in a neighborhood called Del Mar in a little town called Tiburon. So I was Shark of the Sea, man. That's where I grew up.
Exactly.
I went to Del Mar Middle School.
What are the mascot for Del Mar?
I think it was a shark.
Was it?
I'm assuming.
Shout out to the Sharks.
Yeah.
Del Mar Sharks.
I don't really know. It's a great question. I was really sporty.
Yeah. On top of it.
I could tell you what the mascot of my high school, which was Redwood High School.
Oh, okay.
Is a tree.
There we go. Of course. Why veer out of the box?
Exactly. It's very literal. I grew up in a very literal world. And Esteban's making a big speech about how he's going to tax all the people and basically, I'm going to be a horrible bad guy. And up comes Lauren Hutton with some pamphlets, and she is
resplendent in her purple.
Yes.
Which is a royalty color. So it's an interesting choice, right? To stand out from the people. Hey, listen.
I'm going with the royalty color. It's like deep stuff, man. This movie is symbolic.
It's on purpose.
Well, they picked the purple outfit. That's definitely on purpose. Whether or not they picked it because of royalty, I don't know.
Because she conveys a certain kind of aboveness.
But isn't she fighting for democracy, the antithesis of royalty?
But what happens later, which we see in a little bit, is Don Diego calling her out.
Right, because she's
her look and her appearance and everything like this. So that's the thing. So she's out passing out pamphlets, like, trying to go against the alcalde. And just when they're about to arrest her, she says, "Don't I have a right to speak here in this square?"
Right.
Because by tradition and by law. And he says, "You do?" The alcalde says, "You do, but arrest anybody who listens." So, so there you go.
And then we get to this thing where Diego's there and he's talking to her about her being a rich person, and he could smell her
perfume.
Her perfume. It's like something oil of sheep.
Yeah.
Ship. And we get our first running gag about pronunciations. Lots of gags where she misunderstands him and is correcting his pronunciation. Okay, here's the thing about this joke. What language are they speaking?
What, English?
Are they?
Yes.
Isn't everybody here speaking Spanish?
Well, at the time, sure. But she speaks English because she's an American from California.
And she's coming in making speeches in English to this community that all speaks Spanish.
Well, there you go. But it is Los Angeles.
Well, at a time when Los Angeles was part of Mexico.
Right. So, I think there's I get your point.
In reality, they're all probably speaking Spanish.
Sure,
and people who speak Spanish don't pronounce Spanish. She would actually be the one who would have problems communicating.
That's fair.
Not everybody else.
But he does try to speak in English to her, and I think she thinks he's saying shit.
I thought she's saying ship.
She's saying, yeah, and then he says shit, the ships, the ba-ba-bas. And so I think she's saying shit's in the field. And so for her, I think she thinks he's saying that she smells like poop because the shit's in the field.
I missed that one. That one.
Yeah. Well, it takes a few watches. It's a subtle comment.
I gotta sit down and do it again.
It's a subtle comedy.
And Paco comes up, offers to pour her a glass of wine, which she drinks out of the bottle.
Yeah.
And later on, we're with Diego, and he's kind of talking about Lauren, and Pac is making some gestures, and in comes Consuelo, the maid, carrying
this is so funny.
essentially a coffin.
Yeah.
This is like a classic kind of Mel Brooks joke.
Yes. Yes, it is.
I think so. So to me, there's a tradition of comedy that's sort of Jewish comedy that grows out of the Catskills that really dominates a lot of comedy from the mid 50s until the mid 80s, I would say. And to me, that's Mel Brooks is the peak of that, and this is in that school.
Yeah,
I don't think it's at the same grade level for me.
That's fair.
But so Consuelo's carrying around this giant coffin or something, and we're continuing to ignore her. We hear there's a letter from Esteban, and apparently there's going to be a masked ball, which Florinda wanted to throw. And while Diego is going on about what should he be a samurai or a pirate or whatever, Consuelo continues to walk around with this giant coffin on her back. And finally, we get to open it up, and because there's something about his destiny in a letter from his father, who has died.
A very serious letter,
right?
Because and that she's trying to tell him, but she says something about your destiny, and it is when he hears destiny, because he's been ignoring her the whole thing.
Destiny, no escaping that for me. That's a deep Cine-Files cut. Everyone can go try to know who doesn't know what that is. Can figure it out.
It's his density, and so that's the thing that stops him, his destiny, and so he gets the letter, reads it, and opens the case and sees that his father was, which he never knew, his dad was Zorro.
Well, and this is the classic Zorro story, which is the son coming home from Spain, where he studied swordsmanship, just like Batman. Bruce Wayne was off the world studying all of his martial arts, and he's come home to discover that his father was Zorro and that he needs to take on the role.
Yes. And
there's a letter from Dad that's kind of funny. He said, I do like this joke. My dear son, I do not call you by name because I don't know which of the brothers will get this.
This is a nice little mystery.
A little twist. The greatest gifts I possess.
This sword with which to fight injustice. This mask with which to deceive tyranny. And this hat which needs reblocking.
The joke plays twice, too, later on. So I love it. And this hat that needs reblocking.
Well, and these are the jokes, folks.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like, so if you're listening to us and you think this doesn't sound like a funny joke, I don't think this movie's going to work for you because these are the jokes.
And the film leans into all of them.
Oh, yeah.
Leans into all of them.
And what he says is, this is the perfect costume to wear to the ball.
Yes.
Out in the road, there's a peasant in trouble, and Diego and Paco, Diego now dressed as Zorro, come riding up.
How dare you skip the part where Paco comes in dressed as a bear? How dare
Wait, are you saying that I haven't given this film the respect
yes,
that it is
that
due?
Joke is funny. Paco comes in dressed in some sort of dog outfit, thinking that he's dressed as a bear, and then they have an exchange, and Diego says, "Oh no, no, I'll give you a pig. That's as much as I will give you." And then he sits down. Paco turns his back on Diego and is hurt, and he's sullen. And he goes, "Oh no, from the back now I can see you are a dog. You look like a bear. You look like a bear." And then Paco is like, "Go, no, don't, stop it, stop it." Then he takes his hand, starts walking him out, and says, "You're going to meet so many nice people, maybe a chicken, a goat, maybe another little bear." This is funny stuff. So they're riding now, dressed as Zorro and the bear.
I have to comment on this now. So I believe you took just about as much time to describe it as it took in the movie. Yours was more entertaining.
Oh, how dare you?
I complimented you.
I know, but I loved it in the movie.
Yeah, I don't find that funny, but okay.
All right, yeah, they're riding. So he's dressed as a bear in his outfit. And
Zorro's he's dressed as Zorro, and we find the peasant, and we ride off like, let's go fight some injustice.
Yes,
we go catch the bad guy with that big Max Steiner score.
Yeah,
there's a sword fight. They both get knocked off by a tree branch. Again, sword fight is adequate.
Yes.
And he defeats the guy and says, "Spread the word, a new bandit has arrived, a bandit known only as," and he makes the Z.
On the tree, yeah.
And the guy goes, "What's that?"
And he lifts his eye patch.
Again.
These are the jokes.
These are the jokes. And says his name's Zorro. We go back to the peasant and give him back his money. Of course, that's when we find out that was the tax collector.
Yes.
And then we get in conversation of, he makes the Z again, and he goes, "You know what that is?" He goes,
"The number 2.
The number 2? No, my daughter, she's in school."
I like that he says, you keep up with the local news and the happenings. I like the joke that he brought him back more than the taxi actually took. So he feels a little guilty about it.
Right.
He's like, well, just spread it around to everybody else. All right.
And he describes him that he's going to help the helpless, friend the friendless, and defeat the defeatless.
Yes. Well said.
We're at the party. Charlotte, who's Lauren Hutton, is outside, and Diego brings her inside, and now we're in the big ball, and there's dancing, and Diego, presents Charlotte to Florinda, who asks why she's not wearing a costume, and she doesn't believe in dressing up when other people are starving.
By the way, Lauren Hutton is good in this movie.
And here's the thing. You get cast in a movie.
Yeah.
You have a job, and she does it 100%.
She does.
She is completely committed to this, and she does it. I totally agree. She is good in this
She's
movie.
the only straight one in the movie. Everyone else is played for laughs. She's straight.
Yeah, talking about straight gets us into a whole other...
True, fair point.
It's a whole other thing in this film. And the tax collector comes in. Outside, the peasants are starting to mumble because Zorro has returned.
Yeah.
Zorro!
He said his name was Zero.
And he goes, well, go find him. And the tax collector turns around. It's like, well, there he is.
Yes.
And Esteban draws his sword and kind of slaps it at Diego's chest. And they have some witty repartee, some parry and thrust, if you will, about pointed heads and sharp wit and dull swords. And then we have a sword fight. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good sword fight. There's stuff on the table.
I love how you hung up on the sword fighting. This is very funny to me. You're hung up on the sword.
Zorro movie.
How believable is that? Oh, okay. That's a damn good point. All right.
It's a Zorro movie,
Proceed.
dude. Zorro movies are about sword fights.
I step back. That's a fair point.
I kind of want to touch on something I meant to say it earlier that you said, which is about this movie being respectful to Zorro movies. Yeah. This is key to satire. Is that this is what we talked about when we talked about when we talked about Young Frankenstein?
Yeah.
Is that the really good satires love the thing they're making fun of. Mm-hmm. And I think there is some love for Zorro movies, and you cannot do Zorro movie without sword fights.
Yeah.
Like that is part of the whole thing.
That's a fair point.
You know, and I'm sure, I don't remember it, but I'm sure when they're doing the Princess Bride sword fight, they talked about Zorro.
Yeah.
I'm sure they did. Mm-hmm. And the Tyrone Power sword fight in the 1940 Zorro, that is a really good one. Mm-hmm. And I've seen the Douglas Fairbanks one is also a good sword fight. Mm-hmm. But actually this goes back to the discussion of guilty pleasures, is that I, as a kid, would do anything to see a sword fight.
Yeah.
That's part of why I love those martial arts movies, is I love great fight choreography.
Yeah.
So of course, even when this movie came out, I'm sure I was looking at the sword fight.
Yeah, probably.
And he just, after Zorro disarms Esteban, he goes,
I can see that your pockets are lined with the money you have stolen, and your shoulders are padded with false expenses, and your fancies bulge with greed.
And takes his pants down.
he fights his way out, jumps out the window, and lands and breaks his leg. And says, shit.
Yeah. The only cuss word in the movie.
Is it?
Yeah, I think so.
I think there's a fuck.
Is there?
Well, I don't know. It's been in my notes.
Okay.
I mean, you've seen the movie. I've seen the movie.
I don't remember.
Once.
Yeah, but it might have popped up and I just didn't think about it.
And Diego's back home, and Florinda comes to find him, climbs up the wall, jumps on top of him, essentially mounts him, hurts him on his foot. And again, she is not satisfied with Esteban, the king of the beasts.
Yes.
They only have sex 12 times a year.
In one night. And of course, true to form, as the Latin Lothario, he has to ask the question, does he eat anything special to make sure he can do it 12 times a night? That's fair. Garlic, lots of garlic.
Is that a conversation? I mean, I've always heard that joke. Is that particularly a Latin thing to discuss?
Sexual prowess in the bedroom?
No, I meant the food, the garlic and the oysters and stuff.
Well, if he can go 12 times in one night, you got to ask how. That's a fair point.
It's fair.
It's usually oysters is the joke nowadays, but the garlic was a good joke then.
That's a lot of garlicky breath.
Yeah, I don't want to smell that.
Yeah, not for 12 times.
Have you ever had garlic? Never mind. I don't like garlic. And sometimes I've dated women before who like garlic, and I can smell it through their skin, through their pores. Turns me off like nobody's business. I can't do it.
It is powerful stuff.
It is. I'm not a big fan of it. Although it is really good for your stomach, the pure garlic.
I love garlic. I cook with garlic. Garlic is delicious.
There you go.
How it smells on people after is a whole, that's a different discussion.
Yeah, sure. How it smells on the pimples. Yeah.
We're going to move on the peoples.
I'm having too much fun.
The alcalde is here, and Florinda hides in the Zorro costume coffin.
In the coffin, yeah.
Yeah,
with
and
the heart on it, yeah.
and Zorro and Diego is in the bed, and
By the way, my friend, why were you not at my party tonight?
so this is obviously he's suspecting him from the beginning. And what's so funny is he's going to suspect him and then not suspect him.
Right.
And then suspect him again like this is a totally new thought. And then not suspect him and then suspect him again.
There's a lot around Don Diego. They're like, for God's sakes. Like, how many clues do you need?
It does go. I think we came up on the Cine-Files before. Is that that meme of facial recognition on Clark Kent?
Yeah,
It's
right.
like, that's Superman. It's like, come on. It's pretty clear who you are.
Exactly.
But and so he jumps out of bed and he walks around, does some manly walking, jumping, running in place.
Walking and jumping and running in place, and walking and jumping and running in place, and walking and jumping. Alan! Yeah, it's so good.
Oh wait, when does he stab the coffin?
Right before he's walking out. He's all frustrated about the Zorro.
And so he
stuff.
stabs the coffin and says, it's my temper. My wife says it'll be the death of her.
A little sooner than you think.
And he exits and the coffin opens and she was fine. I guess he missed her.
Thank God for small favors.
Yeah. But now we have problems because how's Zorro going to fight?
True. He's got a twisted
What are we
ankle,
gonna
a
do?
broken ankle.
This is signed. We have little title cards that come up, and this one says, Reign of Terror enters third week. No end in sight. Esteban is torturing people. He's going crazy, having all firstborn males named after him.
Yes.
Even pets.
That's too far.
And in comes Ramon.
Well, I was Ramon 20 years ago when Father decided it wasn't quite masculine enough, so he shipped me off to sea in that British frigate. They say the Navy makes men. Well, I'm living proof they made me.
We have arrived at the meaning of the title.
Yes. Which he actually says, which I love. But yeah, this is Bunny Wigglesworth, the introduction of his twin brother. This is George Hamilton again, this time in full-on powdered whiteface with the wig, wearing an old school British
Ridiculous
admiral thing.
So I don't know quite how to approach this character.
I think this is a great character. He's not played for laughs, I think, overtly.
Hold on.
Overtly.
Not played for laughs.
He is a warrior. He fights. He is not, he does it his own way in his own style. He's got the English. Now, here's a good question for you. Do you like the English accent that Hamilton does or the Latino accent or the Mexican accent he does? Which one is better?
Well, you've said that you really like the Latino accent.
I don't mind his accent, yeah. But I think he nails the British one here.
I think they're good accents.
Yes.
But I think you're distracting us from the larger point. Accents aside. So I went around. I tried. I tried to do what research I could. There's nothing.
How could there be any?
There's almost nothing about this film. The one thing I found was several mentions of this describing this as blackface.
Wow.
That this is the archetypal stereotype of a gay man played for laughs, and honestly, to some degree, that's how I feel about it.
I would say that it was way more in The Way of the Dragon than this.
Yes, but Way of the Dragon is not called Gay of the Dragon.
This
is
it's
called
not.
Zorro the Gay Blade. This is the central joke of the whole film.
Right.
Is a stereotype gay man as Zorro.
I would love to get, I wish we had Michael's take on this. It would be funny to have Michael's take on this, but I don't see him as stereotypically. I could see how people could feel this way, right? But he doesn't lisp. He does
lisp.
He doesn't like.
He talks about shopping. He likes fancy clothes.
Sure.
I mean, like everything. He has a whip.
Yes.
Like everything about him
But
is.
he isn't less manly. He is never seen as less manly. He comes in as the savior. They treat him as the savior. Don Diego is completely subservient to Ramon in the whole situation. Paco as well. And when he decides to take it on, they let him take it on in his way. And he uses the whip. And yes, he wears different colors, but at no point is he doing the doing the limp wrist going, oh, it's so good. He's playing the role a lot stronger than a stereotypically gay person we've seen in other films.
Well, this is so.
And by the way, I'm not discounting the feeling that it is blackface. Right?
Sure.
In my opinion, it isn't.
Well, and again, this goes to why what you said last night kind of made me go, oh, I guess this is an interesting film to talk about, because there's a thing that happens, and you know what? We talked about this way back in When We Were Kings, which is the idea of what does, and we talked about it with Sidney Poitier in The Heat of the Night.
Yes.
Is what does a person have to represent in order to advance the cause forward? And that do you challenge the norm, or is it enough to be represented? So if Rochester in Jack Benny, who plays kind of a stereotypical character, is a representation of an African American on radio and on TV, and that to some degree is better than no representation, or Butterfly McQueen in Gone with the Wind, even though those are stereotypical representations to some degree. And then there's we have to challenge those representations and do things that are different, and that's the reason is When We Were Kings is the Jack Johnson and Muhammad Ali versus Joe Louis and Jackie Robinson is like, or what they describe with Sidney Poitier of being the impeccable black manner. I think that was the name of like that he was perfect. So, we can't present any faults. We have to present perfection. And then there's we have to present people as human. And it's like, when there are no representations of gay men in film, this is a gay man who I believe is really stereotypical, but is also the hero. Yes. Without question. He's unquestionably the hero. And that's why I would be curious to hear what Michael has to say about it.
Sure.
Is that in 1981, if you were part of the gay community, largely in the closet, did you look at this film and go, this is funny and it's cool that we're the hero? Or did you look at this film and go, they are reinforcing this negative stereotype and we are bothered by it in 1981?
Yeah. And I wonder, because once again, this is a more well-rounded gay character. There are stereotypical approaches in that. Yeah, he talks about shopping, or he has a lighter lift in his voice, a lighter lift in his voice. I don't hear the list, but if you say there's a list, fine. But to me, what he is from the beginning is a dominant character. He is not a submissive character. He's not played to be, he is not taken advantage of. He's not in any way, shape, or form a dumb character or a character. No. That's what I'm saying. So yes, maybe the initial presentation of him as coming down with the umbrella and everything like that is a little stereotypical, but the character itself is very much constantly ahead of everybody else, and very much wins every battle he gets involved in and saves the day at the end.
Well, and I would say the Gay Blade Zorro is more of a badass than Don Diego Zorro.
There we go.
So and it gets to this weird thing, which has taken me a while to kind of get my head around, is we obviously understand the power of negative stereotypes and how reinforcing negative stereotypes about people, can be so dangerous and painful. But there's also a problem with positive stereotypes. Jews are good with money. That's a stereotype. It's kind of, if you said it as the Jews are cheap, that's the negative version. But you say that, Jews are really good with money. Well, that sounds positive.
Yeah.
Or Asians are really good at math. Or African Americans have good rhythm or are good at sports.
Or
athletes, right? So these are all, they sound positive.
Yeah.
But they also put into a box the people that they're describing and saying that you are, because you're part of this group, you are like this.
Right.
And so, even though I believe this is a stereotype, it is handled in a positive way. And then we go, okay. And of course, obviously we've talked about this many times on the Cine-Files, much to our audience's irritation sometimes is no one would do this today.
Right.
We would never present it. Even when we talked about Birdcage with Michael,
right,
is that it was interesting to watch that. That's extremely positive.
Yeah.
But it was also like he described that this is the butch guy, Robin Williams, and this is the effeminate couple, and that in fact gay couples really don't break down in this way. And in 1995 that was groundbreaking and insightful and really human, but maybe today you wouldn't do that either.
If you do this today, you cast a gay actor.
Right. Well, I think this is where that blackface comment comes
because
from.
you look at Sean Hayes in Will and Grace.
Right.
God's sakes.
Yep.
What are we talking about? He is, every stereotype in the book is represented by what he does, but because he's gay, it's okay. I wonder where the line is, right? If I have a Latino playing all the Latino stereotypes, which drove me nuts about Desperate Housewives.
Sure.
How Eva Longoria played a conniving, cheating on her husband, Latina who was constantly all about money and status and looking good. It drove me nuts. There was no depth to what she did. And it frustrates me. Devious Maids frustrates me. that's ridiculous. But we're okay because it's Latinos playing it. No, I think there's more nuance to this conversation, certainly. I hear
it's also why Karen doesn't like Goodfellas and reluctant to watch Sopranos, which I've never watched it either, because which I always wanted to, and I know it's supposed to be great. But she's like, well, I don't like. She hates the New York, New Jersey Italian stereotype, and the reinforcement of that really bothers her. And even though those are clearly great pieces of art, sure. Well, and this is and the reality
and
is
complex pieces of art.
Yeah. And I'm going to say maybe a controversial or offensive statement is stereotypes exist because there's stuff there.
Yes,
I
think all of us secretly know that.
I mean, not
say it out loud, but we secretly know.
Not that I think Latinos are conniving or but as a Jewish person, a lot of Jews are good with money.
Yes. It's been my experience.
Yeah.
I'm jealous of how good some Jews are with money.
Well, and I was raised that my dad talked to me about how mortgages worked when I was 11,
That doesn't happen in Latino households.
I mean, well, it probably, and this is the thing about stereotypes.
Yeah.
I am 100% certain that it does in some Latino households.
In some, right.
Fair. But if you balance out what is the percentages of Jewish parents having conversations with their kids about money, there's probably more of them than there are with Latino parents.
Right.
It's weird that Zorro the Gay Blade has gotten us here.
Yeah,
But this is kind of part of why I went, maybe this is an interesting conversation, is that the problem with stereotypes is when you put them on people. Mm-hmm. It's not, it's like when you meet a Jewish person and have an expectation about who they are and what they are based on the stereotype it's not that there's not stuff in the stereotype, but you meet a Latino and you automatically think a bunch of stuff about them. Mm-hmm. Well, that's the prejudice in the beginning of racism.
Which they do address when the alcalde makes fun of him, but look how many times he is caught out by the gay Zorro, because the alcalde is stuck in a prehistoric way of thinking about this guy, and he is not prehistoric.
Zorro the Gay Blade, deep movie.
Me? You wish me to be Zorro? You mean to wear that drab little costume and charge about picking fights with total strangers? What? It is our destiny.
And now he finds out that he has this destiny to be Zorro.
It's very dip.
It's very dip. For the peoples.
For the peoples.
And we come up with sort of the plan of you be Zorro, in my stead. And he's like, he doesn't want to wear the drab clothes.
Right.
And he doesn't know how to fence, but pretty good with a whip.
I just love how he's able to get these outfits done so quickly. And no one questions it.
He goes to Peter, the dressmaker.
Oh, the dressmaker. That's right. St. Peter the dressmaker.
And then we do this totally bizarre scene where one side of his face is as Bunny, and the other side of his face is Don Diego Zorro, and he turns back and forth switching accents.
And George Hamilton's fantastic in this.
Did you know that he won the Golden Globe for this role?
What? I did not know that. For Golden Globe comedy?
Yep.
Even more vindication. Yes. He's good in this role.
And this is the thing.
These are two completely different people.
Just like we said with Lauren Hutton, you got to go all out, and he does. He goes 100% into this role,
and he creates both those characters.
Yes, he does,
and they're completely distinct.
And this is where we get, when we finally agree this is going to work, that he says,
"But I'm afraid this costume's not to my taste. If I am going to be this Zorro chappie, I want to make more of a statement. I want the world to recognize Zorro the Gay Blade."
There should be there must be on the internet somewhere a list of movies where they said the title in the movie.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
It's not my favorite thing. And he comes and rescues some peasants from the tax collector. Same music. Now he's using a whip. He spells out Zorro with a whip. Esteban's asking questions. We get into this set of jokes about, what was he wearing? Oh, plum.
And then he was green like an avocado. And then it was
a banana. So it's two fruits and a vegetable. It's like, no, avocado is a fruit.
And then he goes, okay. Yeah. And then you get the salad.
The rose.
The rose. So, two fruits, one vegetable, and a fruit salad.
Fruit salad. There's some slow-mo shots of Zorro.
Yeah.
And he says, there's no shame in being poor, only in dressing poorly.
It's good advice. Like Fernando said, right? It's better to look good than to feel good.
I was about to go into like the class analysis of Fernando versus Zorro the Gay Blade, but we're gonna move on. And
By the way, Billy Crystal, honorary Latino. For Fernando, man, he was good with that.
You got to put this list up. New top 10 show. Top 10 honorary Latinos.
This could be a good Patreon topic. Anyway, yeah.
I've never tried to put in a relist or topic, whatever your thing are. I don't know if I'm eligible.
That could be a good thing.
I don't know. I might have to give more money. I'm not sure. Okay. Speaking of money, Zorro's giving some money to Charlotte. She says, "You seem so much freer than other men."
Comfortable in your skin. Once again, that's a compliment.
Absolutely. And his lines, "The way these pants are cut, you don't feel so constrained." Sorry, my accent is not good.
I don't care. It's fun.
Okay. Anyway, and she's into Zorro.
Yeah.
Anything that you would ask me to do, I would do gladly. Anything.
Now, was she into the other Zorro?
Well, we don't find out till later. And when she does admit that she always knew it was Don Diego. And then she said, for a while, I thought you were two different people, but then I realized it's just two sides of the same man.
Which it's not.
Which is not.
And I would contend that she seems far more attracted to this Zorro.
Yes.
Than the dude that she's going to end up with.
Because he's more open with his emotions. He's more vulnerable. Remember, he said, this is 1981. Later, and when they have that exchange that Hamilton or Don Diego says to her, "Oh, you like being vulnerable. You like men who are vulnerable." 1981.
Yeah. Deep movie.
I'm just
Zorro
saying.
the Gay Blade. And she basically offers herself to him, and we go back to Don Diego, and Ramon comes in kind of prancing.
Yes.
And we talk about Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
And basically that Charlotte's into me. And Diego's just like, "Then you are very lucky," you know?
Yes, well, why don't you look at it this way? In 50 years, you'll be just another toothless old hag. 50 years with her will be a lifetime with anyone else.
Because the Gay Blade is, once again, smarter than everybody else. He says what she's in love with is Zorro, not me. And so that's, once again.
He definitely throws his brother, a bone.
He's knowledgeable.
Yeah. And Esteban comes up, sees the cane, and he goes, no, it's a sword to protect myself from Zorro because there's a sword in the cane. And he also swings at a candle because candle slicing is an important Zorro trope that, of course, we have to do.
My old compatriot, my heart is heavy to tell you, you have missed.
And I love that he takes the candle off and says, "You are correct." Esteban has a new plan. He's going to shoot one peasant a day until Zorro gives himself up.
I like how they both realize it's a little too far.
Yeah. And then he screams and draws his sword because this is this Esteban move.
Yes.
We check out the wanted poster. And now we get into, does this remind you of someone?
Yes, it is Zorro. I know it is Zorro.
And he takes the scarf around Diego's face and lifts it up and goes, "It reminds me of you." So now he wants him to say something like a sissy boy.
See, and who's saying that? The villain. The villain is saying.
Yes. And who's laughing at it?
I don't know.
The audience is laughing.
I start to laugh
when they start going the back and forth.
Right, when he starts doing the movie, because it's comical to watch a straight man try to do that, and it's played for laughs because it's ridiculous.
Right, because gay people are ridiculous.
No, because straight men trying to act like that is ridiculous.
There is a long, long history of jokes about who and what gay men are that have been funny because of kind of limp-wristed, lisping, prancing jokes, which is what this is.
Okay.
Like yes, it is a straight man doing this role, and it is doing it for laughs.
Would you be just as offended if a gay man did a version of a straight man? Like we see with Nathan Lane trying to be straight all through moments of the Birdcage.
So, and this gets into...
Once again, it's a comedy.
So one of the things that's... how am I going to say this the right way? One way of looking at that, some people look at things, is that oppressed communities have different rights from non-oppressed communities.
Yes, of course.
So that this group can make that joke and this group cannot make that joke.
Right.
It's like... I don't know why I'm getting into this thing.
This is a fair point.
Like having a gay pride parade, and then can you have a straight pride parade?
Right.
Of
course.
And it's like, well, do you need a straight pride parade?
Right.
And in my basic egalitarian, idealistic point of view, everybody should have equal rights to say everything. I don't like the idea that there are topics which one group can talk about and another group can't talk about.
Interesting.
That doesn't seem, because I believe in free speech. Free speech is super, like we did Ken Burns' Civil War.
Right.
Ken Burns is one of the most brilliant people in the world who has made a career dealing with issues of race in an incredibly intelligent, subtle, complex manner.
Yep.
And he's a white New England kind of guy.
Sure.
And I would never want anyone to say, hey, Ken Burns, you really shouldn't be talking about race. You're a white guy. I don't want that. I want people, I believe that's what free speech is about. However, I also think that there are a bunch of people who've dominated the conversation for most of history.
Yes.
And they should probably shut up about certain topics for a while, or at least, you know, my dad's expression always was, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them in that ratio. You know, is that at least you should shut up and listen first.
Yeah.
It's not that you can't. It's like, I believe that I can have an opinion on women's rights or on gay rights or on race. I read a lot and thought a lot about race. Race is an incredibly important issue, and I believe that I have things to say. But I don't believe that I should tell you about Latino rights or Latino history or Latino culture. I think I should listen to you, but I do have the right to an opinion.
Yeah, of course.
You know, and that's where, so I mean, again, Zorro the Gay Blade.
But that's why this is such a fun film to talk about this stuff with.
Well, this is why last night you turned me around on it as I went, oh, you know, it might, in terms of, because I was really worried. It's like, is Zorro the Gay Blade where the Cine-Files jumps the shark?
No.
You know, like we're going to go, we've been doing great films, Citizen Kane, Lawrence of Arabia, and even the ones that are some guilty pleasures like Armageddon or Con Air or Police Story or whatever. Like we those are films with big groups of fans that there was a lot of talk about. And I went, I don't know if Zorro the Gay Blade is, because it's not like there are a lot of fans hankering for this film. I don't think.
You might be surprised.
Well, but that's
fair enough.
We're going to find out. You know,
our numbers.
Well, and on Twitter, we can tell as soon as we announce a film, there's usually a yes, I can't wait. Like when we put out Con Air, I was a little bit worried, and there was an explosion of excitement about Con Air. I don't know what it's going to be like. I'm more confident about Way of the Dragon, that there's a lot of Bruce Lee fans. But wouldn't it be cool if there was a whole bunch of people who said, this is my guilty pleasure too?
Yeah, sure. Certainly Matthew Hasso would think it's cool.
I think so. And there is, as we said, there's some limp wrists, there's some dancing, there's a lot of stuff that happens here. And then we see a dude like in an orange cape, and we run out to get him. And this is where we get our padre from the Order of Saint Peter the Dressmaker,
who was Christ's tailor.
Christ's tailor.
These are the jokes, folks.
And it convinces him and says, hey, pray for me because of this Zorro thing.
Yeah.
And there's a ridiculously insulting and funny prayer.
It's pretty funny.
Oh, Heavenly Peter,
Oh, Heavenly Peter,
he who sows and knits,
he who knits and sows,
so that we may follow in his passion.
so that we may follow in his fashion.
Let the simple inane man
Let the simple and inane man
find what he seeks.
find what he seeks.
And then he says, now you count to 10 as a prayer, and he bugs out. And then he offers him some money. He's already gone. And of course, now he's on the horse and has stolen all of his stuff because that's when Esteban realizes that's Zorro. Florinda wants another mass ball. And a lot of it is to show off this beautiful necklace she has.
Yeah.
And he goes, oh, this is great. It's going to be a trap to catch the bandit. We're at the ball. Esteban is dressed as Henry VIII, and he gives instructions to the guards to stay right around Florinda at all time, which leads to some silliness. And he goes, now we got to be really careful because he's not going to just walk in and say, here I am.
Right.
Cut to.
Here I am.
Here I am!
Diego writes in, dressed as Zorro. He goes, arrest him, whips off the mask. Oh, you're Zorro. He's like, no, some servant told me to come dressed as Zorro. And then you hear, here I am. And then it ends up that everybody comes dressed as Zorro.
Yep. Which was a great.
It's a good
idea.
No, I'm sold. It's a good funny idea.
But the one person who doesn't come dressed as Zorro.
Yeah, because now everyone is dancing, and we get to see his Diego's cousin, which is Buddy Wigglesworth from Santa Barbara.
This is an old tradition.
Oh yeah,
since Milton Berle.
Yes,
of the dressing up as a woman.
Yeah,
Monty Python did it.
Yep.
Certainly, even up to Martin.
Shakespeare.
Shakespeare. Yes, absolutely. Going all the way back to Shakespeare. Yes, of course.
Yeah, dudes dressing on. Drag has a long tradition.
It does.
And Esteban is immediately smitten. Florinda is walking around with dancing guards all around her. And then Bunny runs up and spills a drink on Florinda, who screams, and they head off to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And Esteban turns to Diego and says, "Your cousin, she's not a woman."
And Diego's like, "Oh no."
She is a goddess.
I love when he turns back around. He's like, "Oh my God."
Yeah. And inside the bathroom, Bunny is all over Florinda. Helps her pass out, steals the necklace, and she comes back out, no necklace, and they go, "Oh my God!" and screams.
Yep.
Nick. They run in, and he's gone.
Yes.
They don't immediately go, "That's your cousin."
Yeah. By the way, that was also the guy from the Order in the garden.
Right.
Yeah, so there's a lot of clues here that the alcalde is purposely...
He suspected him right from the beginning.
Right from the beginning.
And then just stopped. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Esteban's not the smartest guy.
He's not the smartest guy.
Yeah. And now the brother, the gay blade, is like, "Okay, I'm out of here. I'm going to go back to my ship. I'll see you later."
Yep.
You go off and find Charlotte. He goes to find Charlotte, puts the necklace around her as Zorro. And she knows that it was Diego.
Yeah, the whole time.
And they have a little romantic scene. We have more pronunciation jokes.
Talks about vulnerability.
A kid comes and warns him that soldiers are coming. We see there's a spy that's watching.
Randomly a spy.
Yep. Just when I return, we will not have to worry about how to pronounce virgin. And then for some reason the spy is talking to Esteban, and Paco is in another room and overhears it while jumping up and down behind some windows. And Esteban, as a reward, throws the spy in solitary confinement. And Paco goes to tell him that to Diego that they're going to execute Charlotte.
Yeah.
And we have come to the climax of Zorro the Gay Blade.
Yeah.
Because Charlotte is being marched in to be executed. And we got drummers. We have a little drummer joke where Esteban keeps trying to speak and the drummers keep drumming. The crowd is not happy.
Right.
And Esteban has kind of said to Florinda, no, we're not going to kill her. We're just trying to lure in Zorro. Mm-hmm. And they're about to get ready to shoot her. And he goes over to one of the brethren in their cassocks.
Yeah.
Is that the word?
I think so.
Yeah. Anyway, you can't remember.
The
hood. And it ends up, of course, that's Zorro because we see the black glove and he puts a knife to Esteban's throat, but then essentially gives himself up to save Charlotte.
Yeah.
And now Zorro is going to be executed. And there's some back and forth between him and Charlotte.
Why she don't say, "I'm going to love you forever," or something like that?
And then she does say
it.
"I'll love you forever."
I said this to my girlfriend. I said, "Honey, that in a microcosm is a Latino. It's never enough. It's never enough. You can always do a little bit more." And when he says that to her, I'm like, "That's the microcosm right there." She's like, "Is that why we have issues sometimes?" I'm like, "Yes, babes. Welcome to the real world."
So if she just turns to you and says, "I will love you forever," whenever you have issues, you're going to be good?
You're just good to go. You're good to go with that one. Okay. Yeah, all right.
John?
Yes?
I love you forever.
Oh, thank you very much.
You're good now, right?
Yeah, I'm good.
At least through the end of this podcast.
It would have been nice to get a piece of pie with you. Yeah.
I literally in the fridge, there's pie. I have pie.
Great.
Damn it. I should have started with the pie.
Where's the punch?
Led with the pie, then the love you for. God, I ruined it again. This is my one chance. And then we hear, just as they're about to execute him, I'll play it.
2 bits, 4 bits, 6 bits a peso. All for Zorro. Stand up and say so.
See? And there's no lisping there. And there's 7 S's in those sentences. He's just saying it straight up. His own style.
The outfit.
Oh, the outfit's incredible. The yellow. The gold, rather.
Gold. It is gold.
It is fantastic.
Please, sir. And we have a big fight. The peasants attack. Yes. There's a lot of jokes. It's funny. Paco is the sidekick. It does sidekick things just like we saw with Adventures of Robin Hood. Like with I forget the name of that character. Like that is a normal, and he has funny
Sancho Panza in
and they do like belly bumps and things like that because that's what sidekicks do. And finally we have the peasants surrounding all the guards and Esteban and Florinda, and Esteban goes attack and the guards turn around and point their guns at them, and he kneels in front of Florinda and just says, I know you will not desert me And she says, glad to see you're finally developing your sense of humor. And she leaves. Our two Zorros shake hands, and the Gay Blade waves goodbye and rides off, and we're left with Charlotte and Diego. And she says, now that the revolution's happened, she wants to maybe create some new voters.
Yeah.
It sounds like the old-fashioned way. And then she talks about, but we're going to sell your land. We're going to move to Boston.
Move to Boston.
It's the only civilized city. It's just food, art, music. He's like, I've been to Boston. Couldn't hear a single mariachi band.
One decent mariachi player in the city. Now, this is a really funny ending. Because
I don't think mariachi bands existed at this time.
Well, no, that too. But also, is this a callback to the guy who originally wrote the first story of Zorro, who wrote it in Boston?
I'm not 100% sure he's from Boston.
Okay.
Yeah, so...
But that would be an awesome way
that would be awesome.
To give homage to that writer without making it overt.
Should I look up and see where Jonathan Macaulay is from?
If you'd like to. Okay.
Someone else.
Why don't I look it up while you talk?
Okay. It's just me talk. We're at the end of the movie. I have nothing about its reception. I know George Hamilton won the Golden Globe.
That's good.
It was a beloved movie as played in Northern Virginia Latino-oriented film houses in the early 80s.
Yes.
Have you ever listed this on a top 10 show?
No. But I have mentioned it.
Right. I know you
top
mentioned
10
it.
shows.
Yeah.
But we haven't done a top 10 guilty pleasure movie or top 10 like underground 80s comedies movies. We haven't done anything like that.
Have you done top 10 satires?
Oh, no, we haven't.
That'd be a good one.
Satires rarely come out.
Yeah.
So nowadays.
We have all of film history to go on.
Absolutely. There's a lot of satires to play around with, but they rarely come out for us to use it as a topical one for the week. But it could be something that a Patreon of ours, a Boss Hog patron of ours, requests when we do one Patreon request every month for a topic. So it's in play.
I can't afford to be a Boss Hog.
No,
patron.
That's fine. But Matthew Hasso is.
Yeah.
This guy is from Illinois, Ottawa, Illinois, 1883. I don't know if he moved. He was a reporter for the Police Gazette and served as an Army public affairs officer during World War I. He created Black Star, The Spider, The Mongoose, and Thubway Tham. I have no idea who that is.
Thubway Tham?
Yeah, so that was probably somebody with a lisp. He was raised in Chillicothe, Illinois, and he died in 1958 in L.A. at the age of 75. All right.
So we've reached the time for our final thoughts on Zorro the Gay Blade. I will give my final thoughts first.
Sure.
I have thoroughly, genuinely enjoyed our conversation about this film.
Good.
I enjoyed it many times more than I actually enjoyed watching the film.
That's fair.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it more now having talked to you about it. And I kind of going back to my initial point of that maybe part of what a guilty pleasure is that it taps into a thing of yours that isn't getting served. And so even though you recognize that this movie isn't that great, there's things in it that you weren't getting anywhere else, and that's why you keep going back to it. Yeah. Maybe that is my final thought about Zorro the Gay Blade.
All right, fair enough. I will say this. It's one of my favorite 80s comedies, underground 80s comedies, guilty pleasure comedies, and for whatever reason, it hits all the right notes for me with the style of comedy that it is. These under the breath comments, these end of scene comments that before they cut to the next scene. That's where the humor is for me, more so than the overtly big pieces of comedy that are set up. And I enjoy that. And I love that everybody is dialed into what's happening and really leaning into the comedy of it all. Brenda Vaccaro, there's not a unbelievable moment in the entire film. I think from any actor in the whole film, there's not an unbelievable moment. Everybody's fully committed to what they're doing.
They're fully committed to what they're doing.
Whether it's good or not is, of course, a matter of taste or subjection. But like they are fully committed to what they're doing. And Ron Liebman, who went on to have a great career, obviously a lot of things that he's done. By the way, married to Jessica Walter, and I did not know that. Married to Linda Lavin before that. He was great as the alcalde. And all of them, although it's all played for laughs and big overt stuff, there's still a foundation running underneath of respect for the material. And for the character, the weight of being that character and the importance of being that character. Because by the end, Don Diego, who was a Lothario sleeping with married women, is a settled man. He's found his purpose and his destiny to be Zorro, and he's going to have kids and move forward, and he's going to be a hero for the Pipples. And that is a fantastic story overall, whether you agree with the humor or not. And the brothers, who had not seen each other in 20 years, are back reunited and friends again. And that's all positive. So to me, it's a great film in that way.
You know, I was just thinking as you're saying that, is that obviously you have a well-established Latino identity. But I also think that your love for this
well,
that's horrible. But your love for this film shows a deep, deep affection for a certain kind of Catskills Jewish humor.
Oh, yes.
And I think I might give you the title of honorary Jew.
I don't know what to say. I am super honored about that because I have always enjoyed Jewish comedy. I've always enjoyed Jewish comedians, and I love a certain style of comedy comes from
It's come
that
up
era.
a bunch of times. There's a particular, shticky kind of thing that you just love.
Since a child, watching all those things in the 70s, those guys were my favorite comedians.
Yeah.
I didn't listen to Richard Pryor till much later. Eddie was my first non-Jewish comedian that I listened. I'm a massive David Brenner fan. I enjoy so much of the old guys doing the Dean Martin celebrity roast. So many of those comedians were Jewish, and that's how I got into that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, okay. So I humbly accept.
So cinephiles out there, I know you didn't expect it. I know you might have been surprised by it, but the Cine-Files, that is our take on 1981 Zorro the Gay Blade. You know what? I really want to hear what you think.
Yes.
If you watched the film, visit us on our Facebook page, do a search for the Cine-Files, and you can, of course, subscribe to us on iTunes and Stitcher and TuneIn and Google Play. You could go on YouTube and leave comments there on individual episodes. Please leave your reviews on iTunes. They really, really help us.
Yeah.
I feel like they've kind of slowed down a little bit.
Yeah,
we
guys.
could really use some reviews. If without the reviews, then we fall out of the rankings and people don't find us. So that's really, really important. You can support the show, become another Matthew Hasso, maybe even reach the level of totally bribing us and doing a film
certainly possible
by going to patreon.com/thecine-files. You can buy any movie we've ever reviewed except possibly Zorro the Gay Blade because it's not for sale anywhere. I couldn't find it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
like you could buy VHS copies.
I have DVD copies.
You have a DVD. So
I bought in the 80s. 90s rather.
Should people contact you directly to get a copy?
No.
Maybe you could burn something for them. But please visit cinephiles.net. We've got a whole bunch of movies to buy there, and you can listen to all our episodes there. And as always, you can reach me at SR Morris on Twitter, SR Morris1 on Instagram. John, where can they reach you?
You can always find me at The Roca Says on Twitter and on Instagram. And if you do want to see this movie, or you haven't seen this movie, and I don't know why you're listening to this if you haven't seen this movie, but maybe you want to revisit it, I would recommend that you go onto YouTube. There is a full version of it on YouTube. And also, if you go to archive.org/details/Zorro the Gay Blade, you should be able to find it there because 20th Century Fox has an archive of this online, this film online, which is the link I sent, Steve. You can watch it there for free and just enjoy the movie and then maybe listen to our episode again and get a little more out of it.
So go into one of the Cinephile classic archives.
Exactly.
Do you remember when Stephen Sean talked Zorro the Gay Blade?
Oh, if we ever do a live show, they may come up.
And so I think that is it for this week. Next week, we will be back with my guilty pleasure, Bruce Lee's 1972, The Way of the Dragon.